2 lattes, keep the change. So, the guys are going out tonight.
Seriously?
It's for work.
Yeah, you get a lot of work done at Chuck E. Cheese.
I promise it won't be long.
You said that last week.
This weekend, just you and me. We'll sing Girl Bus 2.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
Have I ever lied before?
You are such a charmer.
Oh, thank you guys. Thank you, Drew. Well, it is great to be with you today. I want to welcome each of our locations, not only our Henderson location, but Summerlin, Southern Highlands, Sunrise Mountain, our Kingman family, those joining us in our partnership with God Behind Bars and different prison facilities, and those watching online. Thank you for being with us today. Well, we've been talking about relationships, and we said last week, the quality of your life is directly contingent upon the quality of your relationships, right? Like when things are good relationally, there's peace, there's joy, there's all kinds of good stuff. When things are not good, there's all kinds of drama and bad stuff. I mean, the quality of your life, the quality of my life is in direct proportion to the quality of our relationships. And the good news is we don't have to just settle for wherever our relationships may be. We can actually begin to do some things with intentionality to help those relationships. And so we kicked that off last weekend, and we talked about how every week we're going to have one simple relationship goal for the week. And last week it was togetherness and just the importance of being together, of staying curious about one another, of continuing to learn about what's going on in the hearts and minds of our friends and family members, our dating relationships, our marriages. And today I want to talk to you about another relationship goal, and that is the goal of faithfulness. Faithfulness. Faithfulness is something I think we all want in a relationship, right? Now, if you think about a romantic relationship or a marriage or a dating relationship, we all want faithfulness. Think about a family relationship, a friendship, like you want that person to be faithful, which just sort of implies that you and I should be working on becoming that faithful person, right? Because we all want that kind of a relationship. Problem is, we've all got trust issues because we've all been through some things, right? We've all been in relationships, romantic relationships, family relationships, work relationships, that ultimately the trust began to break down and faithfulness wasn't there. And it scars us. It's like me with the dentist. I'm scarred by the dentist. I am. Every time I get anxiety, every time I have to go back to I haven't been to the dentist in a while because I avoid it as much as I can. And then it's usually when I have a problem. I know this isn't good dental hygiene, forgive me. Then I show up at, the dentist. Then I'll go. But man, I go to the dentist. I remember, see, the issue is for me, I grew up in Texas where we drank well water. And just kind of water out of the well. So it discolored the front of all my teeth. So all these teeth right here, these aren't real. They're veneers over those teeth. That's why they're white, because my teeth were so discolored that I grew up going to the dentist again and again and again. And then when I got out of college, the dentist actually put veneers on my teeth. Do you know what they do when they put veneers on your teeth? They actually sand your teeth down. You look like a vampire. They sand your teeth down, they rough them up, they take the enamel off and all of that so that they can then glue the veneer on, which is supposed to be hard like concrete, like porcelain, or whatever, like it's super tough, right? The challenge is I've had my veneers come off so many times over the years. I remember I was sitting at a baseball game once and with Lori, and I bit into a bagel, and sure enough, I felt a pop, and my veneer, right at my front veneer, was gone. And it's not like it's just gone. It's like there's just like this little fang. It's the craziest thing in the world, man. And I remember I sit back and I look at my bagel, and there's my veneer sticking out of my bagel, and my wife looks at me and she looks at my tooth and she looks at in my mouth and she starts laughing. And now this is no joke. Lori's here. Lori, do you remember that? Lori laughed so loud and so long, tears started to come. You ever get laughing and you just can't stop? No matter what, every time I looked at her, she just kept going. Eventually she's crying and then I started getting ticked off. right? There's a place where you're like, all right, now you're disrespecting me. It's gone to a whole new level now. Anyway, so I've got trust issues when it comes to teeth. One time my veneer came off. I went to the dentist. He put it on, but it just didn't feel quite secure. It didn't feel right. You know, it felt a little off. And I remember thinking like, oh, it could come off at any moment. It could just happen. And I started having this reoccurring dream at night. No lie. Like in my dream, I was speaking publicly, and I was speaking out of town to a group of people that I didn't know. They didn't know me. And my face was on this big jumbotron in my dream. No lie. And all of a sudden, my tooth goes flying out like slow motion on the screen into the audience, and everybody gasps, and people are passing out, and it's like a stampede. People are getting walked on, you know, as everybody runs for the exits because my tooth came off. And then I would wake up. So I go to the dentist, and I'm like, hey, I make an appointment. I go in, and he goes, what's wrong? I said, man, I really just, I need you to take a look at this tooth. And so he takes a look at it. He goes, everything looks fine. He said, what's the problem? I said, well, I think it's just, I don't know. It could just come off. And he goes, no. And he actually took like what looked like pliers. Isn't that funny? Dentists are like, I got the pliers from the hardware store. And he starts like jiggling it, you know, around. He's like, it's rock solid. It's not going anywhere. I said, look, please, will you please just re-glue it? Because I said, like, what if I'm out and I'm speaking and it comes flying off? I keep having this dream, it's flying off when I'm speaking. I need you to re-glue it. So I had to talk him into it. It took me like 20 minutes to get him there. I'm like, I will pay you the money, just do it. So he eventually does whatever he has to do to loosen it, take it off, get it all ready, re-glue the thing back on, right? Awesome. When he's all done, he's like, okay, we're all done here. I said, well, one more thing. Could you send me with like some temporary glue? Because what if I'm out of town and it comes off, and then I could just sort of re-glue it back on until I get back. And then he said something I'll never forget. He goes, Judd, I could do that, but I won't. He said, you have to trust me. I got trust issues when it comes to dentists, right? I've been burned. I got trust issues when it comes to my teeth. They've fallen out. And that's how we are in relationships, right? Like we get trust issues because we've been through stuff in our relationship. You trusted somebody, and then that somebody, maybe they didn't keep their word. Maybe they violated what they said to you. Maybe they lied to you for months or even years in your life. Well, that hurts, right? That's going to impact you in a serious way, and it's going to impact how you move forward and really how you relate to other people. You trust a kid or a friend, and they don't honor that trust. You have a parent violate your trust. Whatever it may be, when you're hurt like that, you begin to have trust issues. How do you rebuild trust when it's been broken? Some of you are here today and you've come through some things in a marriage. Some of you have come through infidelity. Some of you have come through just addiction. You've come through a lot of things. And some of you have made it in your relationship, and that's a powerful, beautiful thing. Some of you, that relationship couldn't survive that kind of stress and pressure. And God has healed you, and you've moved on and begun to move forward. Wherever you're at, it is possible to honor the relationships that you're in. It's possible even to start again treating people with faithfulness. And over time, look, trust is built on the foundation of faithfulness, right? Over time, small promises kept, small actions followed through with. And so no matter where we've been or what's happened in our relational world, we've all got some trust issues, and we can all make some progress when it comes to this area of being faithful. Faithfulness will give you the relationship you want, and it will help you rebuild even the relationship you may have lost. Maybe not like it was, but it can still help you rebuild it. So I've got a Jenga set here today. I don't know if any of you like Jenga. Anybody like Jenga? Jenga. This is kind of the old school Jenga. This is the DIY Jenga right here, okay? This is the backyard. This is actually our backyard Jenga set. And so, the whole idea with Jenga is you've got like 3 boards, and you just sort of lay them across, and then, you flip it 90 degrees, right? And you go 3 across the other way, and then 3 across back the other way, and you stack it all up, and you try to pull the different pieces out and do it in such a way that you don't want to be the person when you pull that piece out, the whole thing collapses on you. Well, I want to talk about faithfulness in the context of Jenga, because I feel like faithfulness is a way that we build trust through small little decisions every day, right? So I tell you I'm gonna do something and I follow through and I keep my word, what happens? Now there's another foundation piece that goes down, right? Somebody tells you a confidence. It tells you something in confidence, and you tell them you're not going to tell anybody else about what they told you, and you keep your word, and you don't tell anybody else. You keep that to yourself. Over time, what's happened? You just put another block down, right? You make a promise to a friend or a family member, and you keep your promise. And over time, it begins to build faithfulness. Begins to build trust in our life. And this is why it's important. All relationships move at the speed of trust. If you want a good marriage, you want a good parenting relationship, you want a good sibling relationship, you want a good work relationship, it all hinges on trust, right? And to the degree that you have trust, you can go. You know, to the degree that you have trust, you can go, right? And to the degree that there's not trust, everything gets slowed down, right? Now we're like, we got to second guess everything. We got to have all kinds of conversations to get anything done. We got to, it's like all this work because trust has been broken down. And so you said you were going to do something and you didn't do it. It's sort of like taking a piece out of the Jenga set, right? It starts to weaken the trust in the relationship. You made a promise and then you didn't keep it. And so, you got to, so see if I find a loose one here. There we go. And so, again, another piece comes out. Now, the good news is, just because we may have done some unfaithful, non-perfect things, and we all have, the whole Jenga doesn't collapse, right? It's still there. The important thing is, yeah, we all make mistakes. Yeah, we all do dumb things. Yes, we all, say we're going to do something and maybe have moments where we do something else. The important thing is, we want to be building a lot more than we're taking away for that trust to continue to grow. Faithfulness builds the relationship you want. So I want to talk to you today about how we can build that kind of relationship in our hearts and in our lives. And to set it up, we're going to look at some teaching of Jesus today in Matthew chapter 5. Here's what Jesus says in Matthew 5, verse 27. We get to the red word, help me out, but he makes a pretty powerful statement here. He says, you've heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. Now, Jesus was in the Sermon on the Mount doing this again and again, where he would say, you've heard, and then he'll kind of state a commandment. You must not commit adultery. Adultery would have been defined as having an inappropriate sexual relationship with somebody who is married to somebody else. And he's like, you've heard the commandment, obvious commandment in the Old Testament and for the Israelite people, you must not commit adultery. But look what it says. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his what? In his heart. What you talking about, Willis? Like, if you look at that, just look at what Jesus actually says. Jesus often says things that don't fit in our little box, right? It's like, what? I mean, we live in a world where lust is just like in the air. It's hard to even imagine a world where lust isn't on every billboard, every other commercial, every other song. It's just kind of everywhere. And Jesus is like, look, you're not even supposed to look. Well, here's the thing. I think Jesus is trying to help us get to the deeper issue. See, the deeper issue when it comes to adultery, unfaithfulness relationally, the deeper issue is a heart issue. Look, before somebody ends up in somebody else's bed, they allow them into their heart, right? It's a heart issue first. So Jesus says, look, let's take it all the way back. Don't commit adultery, but let's go all the way back to the issue of lust. Look, lust isn't, you may have a thought that flashes by your mind. You could argue whether or not that's lust. My question is, are you going to, let's just say you have a commercial flashes through your mind. Are you going to stop and watch the movie? Then it becomes lust, right? Are you going to keep moving and keep, God, I give that to you. I mean, I used to work with a guy at a water park, and it was just, guys walking around with their shirts off and women in bikinis everywhere you looked, right? It was lust on steroids. And you know something he did? He took a little pen, real small, and on his shoe, he drew a little cross on the edge of a shoe. And he said, I walk around, and every now and then I see somebody, and I'm like, oh, and then I look down at my shoe. I'm good. I love it, because what's he doing? He's fighting the battle, right? He realizes there's a battle for my heart. And I want to be faithful. Why? Because someday I want to be in a relationship with somebody that's faithful, because I realize the importance of faithfulness. So if we want to be faithful, first principle is simply this: guard your heart. Guard your heart. Now, I saw this little meme online, and I loved it. It was Admiral Akbar from Star Wars, and it was all these little sayings that he said and she said, and then Admiral Akbar like jumping in saying, "It's a trap." So here they are. Let's bring a few of these up here. She says, "I don't need anything for Valentine's Day." And Admiral Akbar says, "It's a trap." Don't believe it. All right, let's go to the next one. Mind if we stop by the car dealership? Come on. It's a trap. Just gonna check a few out. Everything's cool. Do whatever you want. Akbar says, "It's a trap." Especially if she says, "I don't care, do whatever you want." Then you need to find out what you've done that's gotten you in this situation. All right, here's the next one. Want a back rub? It's a trap. Well, a lot of traps that we fall into happen when we don't guard our hearts and we find ourselves in situations where we're vulnerable and we're tired. And when you want to think about relational unfaithfulness, think about Jenga again. I think one of the reasons Jesus talks about adultery here is because adultery is a foundational thing in a marriage relationship, right? It's the foundational piece. Like with Jenga, if you're playing Jenga and you want to be successful, you don't usually take out one of the bottom blocks because everything rests on that. You want to play a little over here, a little loose over here, right? I don't want to necessarily mess with the bottom foundational blocks. But when it comes to sexual unfaithfulness in a context of marriage, that's like now you're playing with the foundation. And what can happen is some of you've been able to restore a relationship and rebuild trust, and that's a beautiful thing. But many of you also have been through that road and you haven't, right? And the whole thing crumbled and fell. And I think that's why Jesus says you got to guard your heart, because it starts long before it gets to adultery. It starts way back here at the heart issue. Henry Cloud kind of breaks it down this way when he talks about these four corners of connection. I think we can bring this up here, but Henry Cloud sort of breaks it down. First of all, he says, we all have start in relationships, especially when they're deteriorating, where we get to a place where there's hardly just any connection. Maybe we've got trust issues, maybe we've been hurt, but we don't have a lot of connection anymore. We've pulled back. Maybe we're just afraid to even open our heart at all, and so we're kind of in that corner of no connection. Or we find ourselves in another corner, which is the corner of bad connection. Bad connection is where you often start to feel used in a relationship, like somebody just wants to know you or relate to you for what you can do for them, or you're only as good as your last performance, right? Like you're having to perform in the relationship, and that's great for like your Uber driver, but you don't want that with your marriage, right? It's not based on that kind of thing. And so we get into this bad connection, and we have no connection, we have bad connection, we have trust issues. It can drive us into what he calls fake connection. Fake connection is often where we turn to other things to make up for the lack of connection we may feel at home or with the people that we love. And so we may turn to drugs, we may turn to alcohol, we may turn to sort of escapist hobbies. Fake connection is where affairs often actually start to happen, because when you think about it, fake connection is really what most affairs are. Affairs are romance without responsibility. Right? It's all the stuff you don't want right now in a relationship and all the stuff you think you do. And sometimes when people are in it, they can't see anything else. It feels like the most right thing in the world. But then on the other side of it, they look back and realize, oh yeah, that was an escape that I was engaging in. And so Henry Cloud says, look, what we really got to strive to do is move to real connection. And real connection means that we guard our hearts, because every relationship is going to go through no connection, bad connection, even fake connection at different ways and times. We've got to guard our hearts when we're in those vulnerable moments to get to real connection, where we're sharing our thoughts and dreams with one another, where we're open with one another, where we're looking forward into the future together, where we're building trust. When you think about it, the Bible says that Satan is the enemy of our souls. He'd love nothing more than to derail you and me, our family, our lives. And you know what I think he's gonna, if you think about the Jenga illustration, he's gonna come around and he's gonna kind of poke around. See if he can find a weak spot when you're tired and you're vulnerable and you know what, if he can find a weak spot that's even foundational, even better, right? Maybe eventually he could take the whole thing down. And he's gonna push on that weak spot. We got to guard our hearts. So how do you guard your heart to make sure you remain faithful to your kids, to your friends, to your spouse? First, I think you just remember all great relationships are built on this foundation of faithfulness, right? Faithfulness is what builds trust. And faithfulness ultimately builds the relationship you want over the long term. And it can help rebuild the trust that you've lost. In my own life, I'll just tell you what I've done. And I know this isn't realistic necessarily for everybody, but maybe it's just helpful to share it. You probably have your own opinions about this. But, in the media, there was a backlash within the last year about something called the Billy Graham rule. The Billy Graham rule was a rule that he had instituted in his life years before that basically said, look, he doesn't travel alone. He never allows himself to be in a situation, never allowed himself to be in a situation with a member of the opposite sex who he would have been attracted to alone. He always had somebody with him. Now, people have accused those who engage in the Billy Graham rule of being chauvinistic, right? Because, it puts women at a disadvantage in a work environment or whatever. I get it. There's a lot of layers. And it may not even be realistic for you in your life, right? With you may not even have those kinds of options with your work situation and who you need to interact with and relate to. But what I do respect is that Billy Graham had guardrails in place in his life. And he honored them. And he's one of the few people that went all the way to his grave without a scandal related to his marriage and his family life related to unfaithfulness. So I've lived by the Billy Graham rule for over 20 years now. And again, I know it's not realistic for everyone, but I'll tell you what it does for me. I go to bed at night and I don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about a newspaper story coming out tomorrow that your pastor's been unfaithful in his marriage with his wife. Why? Because I've never even been in a room alone with a woman other than my wife in the last 20 years. It's never even happened. I just, So I understand it's not perfect, and I'm not saying it applies to everyone in that way, but I think when you guard your heart, you acknowledge these kinds of things can happen to me and to anyone else. I'm no better than anybody else, especially when I'm vulnerable, especially when I'm tired, right? And especially when the enemy comes around and starts poking around. And so I've got to guard my heart. I got to put some things in my life to ensure that I stay faithful. Maybe you need to guard your social media a little bit, right? All of a sudden, you're married or you're in a committed relationship and somebody comes along and they start DMing you, hey, what's up? So you just respond, you're just being nice. It's not, there's nothing to it yet, right? But then a month goes by and 2 months goes by and now it's like, what's up every hour? And hey, let's meet for coffee. And hey, and then you start kind of fantasizing about that person. Like all of those things are red flags. Watch your DMs. Right? Just be wise. Be faithful. Be faithful. Maybe you're in a hard season right now in a marriage or in a family. And we all go through hard seasons. But studies show that if you will just be faithful through the hard season, most couples 5 years later after the hard season will look back and realize that things are better now. Over 80%, things are better now than they were then. And they ask these couples, what changed? Nothing. Time, perspective, right? They just were faithful. They just stayed in. They pushed through the dry season to get to the other side. And there are benefits to that faithfulness, long-term benefits that you can experience in your life. So guard your heart, guard your schedule, guard your time. Be careful, be conscientious if you want to remain faithful. Faithfulness will give you the relationship you want. It'll rebuild the trust that maybe you've lost. Here's another principle, and that's to keep small promises. Keep small promises. Check this out. Matthew, Jesus' words again. Let's bring it up. Matthew where he's, chapter 5, verse 33. He says, you've also heard that our ancestors were told, you must not break your vows. So again, there was this whole principle about not taking vows. And in that culture, it was getting really distorted. People would take vows and make promises based on this whole hierarchy of things. You know, they take a vow based on the temple, which everybody knew that was only sort of binding, right? Or based on this thing or that thing, based on the city of Jerusalem. You know, I'm going to take a vow based on the holy city of Jerusalem. So it was a little more binding than others and not as binding as some. And it just became this really distorted way that people could say what they wanted and lie and break their word and then do what they wanted, right? So Jesus says, you've heard, hey, you know, you must not break your vows. You must carry out the vows you make to the Lord. But I say, do not make any vows. He's like, this whole system is messed up. And I think you have to understand the context, because I don't think Jesus is saying all vows are bad, marriage vows are bad, any promise is bad. But there was a major abusive vow system that was happening in the Jewish culture at the time that Jesus is addressing. So he says, I say, don't make any vows. Just say a simple what? Yes, I will, or what? No, I won't. Yes or no. Anything beyond this is from the evil one. So Jesus is saying, look, just let your yes be yes and your no be no. And I'm telling you, in a relationship, when you let your yes be yes, when you say you're going to be somewhere for your kids and you show up, it just begins to build more and more trust. When you say you're going to keep a confidence for a friend and you keep that confidence, it builds more trust. When you say you're going to be faithful over time and you're faithful over time, it builds more and more trust. Because that trust is foundational to everything else. So, keeping small promises can be really, really powerful and important. You know, I've had a couple very close friends who got into a real mess in their personal lives and kind of blew up their marriage and ended up being unfaithful to their spouses. These people were actually pastors in ministry. And it destroyed their churches, it destroyed their families. You know, the collateral damage was huge. You know, one of the things that's interesting in a couple cases that I know of, he particularly started keeping secrets from his spouse. And particularly kept his phone private, his social media accounts private from his spouse. Right? More and more there was this separation of things to keep secret, to navigate. And, you know, I would just a thought. Everybody's different. We're all in a different place. But I'll tell you, my wife has full access to my phone. She can access all my social media accounts. She can see what direct messages I'm sending or not sending. She can see my text messages. Heck, she can even track me on the 360 app. I don't care. You say, well, that sounds really confining. That's beautiful to me. It's freeing. Because here's what I know, like sometimes discipline is what actually leads to freedom, right? And that kind of discipline over time builds more and more and more and more and more trust. And then that trust is this beautiful sort of freeing thing. And it empowers your spouse, if you're in a marriage relationship, to begin to interpret your behaviors in the best light possible because they trust you that much, right? Instead of their first thought is like, oh man, can you believe he did that? Well, you don't even know if he did anything, but you're already assuming it. So secrets can be heavy. Columbia University did a study about lies and secrets, and they concluded with something that they called the secrecy burden. I don't know why we needed a study to determine this, but they did one, and they concluded, revelation, when you're keeping secrets, it's a heavy burden in your soul, and it actually slows you down psychologically and emotionally. You know what we say in recovery? You're only as sick as your secrets. You're only as sick as your secrets. So the truth and being honest about things going on in your life can be really powerful. And some of us, we may need to confess. And when I say confess, I don't mean you have to confess to everybody or broadcast your worst things in your life, but you may need to confess to somebody that you trust, that you love, some of the things that have gone on in your heart and in your life so that you can begin to heal and move forward. Look, if we want to stay faithful, we've got to guard our heart. We've got to keep our word, keep small promises, let our yes be yes and our no be no. And anytime we start living with secrets towards those that we love, we've got to ask ourselves why. I feel like anytime you start keeping secrets, financial secrets, That secret credit card, getting up in your world now, right? Right? Anytime you start keeping the gambling secret, that prescription med secret, anytime you start taking something that may have been helpful in a season or just entertainment or whatever, and now you start keeping secrets with it, that is a huge, massive red flag. Don't be in denial about that. That's a red flag. And the best thing you can do with that secret is to that person that you really love is let them in and be honest with them so that you can move forward and continue to build trust before that trust starts to be destroyed. I saw this picture, and we're going to bring it up, of this elderly couple, and this guy had made some comments. You see that man there? It was a guy who had just left this ice cream shop, and he said he looked over, it was like 90 degrees on this particular day, and this man had been in line right ahead of him. And he said, here's this man, probably 80-something years old, and his wife. She's got a bib on her shoulder. She obviously can't feed herself. And he's sitting outside in the hot sun, or in the heat, spooning ice cream into her mouth. And he snapped this picture, and he's like, look at this amazing picture of love. And that picture went, it was liked over 900,000 times. It was shared all over the world. It was commented, thousands of comments after that picture. A lot of emojis, a lot of women tagging their guys saying, this is how you better feed me when I'm, 90 in a car, and, a lot of guys responding back, I'll be there, I'll do it. One person, I thought, said it beautifully. They just said, this is greatness. I don't know what you think's great, but I think faithfulness is pretty great. And it may be sort of out of favor in our culture, but I think it'll make a comeback. Because I think when you're faithful to people you love and trust over the long haul, it builds something beautiful and powerful. And to do that, you may go through some tough seasons, and it may be hard. You may have even had some moments of unfaithfulness, and there's got to be forgiveness and conversations. You may have had trust broken, and so you've got to acknowledge where your heart is and try to heal enough to move forward and trust again. But if we'll work toward it and if we'll be faithful, I believe we can build something great with our relationships. And when you think about it, that kind of faithfulness, that's really the faithfulness that God has toward us. The Bible says that God is faithful even when we are faithless. And sometimes we're faithless. God is faithful. He loved you, he loved me, even when. Some of us, he loved us in our unfaithfulness. He loved us when we didn't keep our promise. He loved us in our brokenness. He loved us through our brokenness, and now he can see us through it to the other side. For some of you, today could be an opportunity for healing, for God to show up and move in your life and just help you realize, look, we may have been faithless in different seasons, but God is always faithful, and we can look to him and he can strengthen us and allow us to move forward. Maybe trust has been broken in a relationship and it's caused all kinds of havoc. But look, what's happened in the past doesn't have to dictate everything about what happens in the future. You can rebuild that trust through faithfulness, small acts of faithfulness over time. Just allow God to move and work in it. And maybe for some of us, we just need a reminder today that Christ came and lived and died and rose again, because in spite of our imperfections, God loves us and cares for us, and he loves you and he wants to be in a relationship with you. And so I'd love to give some of you an opportunity just to reach out to him and ask God to move and work in your life today. Would all of you please bow your heads and close your eyes? And if you'd like to become a follower of Jesus, you can begin that journey by repeating this prayer after me. To say, dear God, I thank you for loving me. Thank you for sending Jesus into the world. I believe he died on the cross for my sins. I believe he rose again. Forgive me for my sins. Give me the gift of the Holy Spirit. Help me face the challenges I'm up against. God, I surrender my life to you. In Christ's name. Friends, with every head bowed and every eye closed, if that's your prayer today, if it's your commitment, I'm going to ask you to just slip your hand in the air. Just to acknowledge you're going to follow God in your life. You're going to trust him. You're going to respond to all that he has done for you. Just slip your hand in the air. God, I'm grateful for each person just reaching out to you today, and I pray you'll show up in their life in a huge way. Bring healing and hope and encouragement for all of us. God, may we just grow in not only our togetherness, but in our faithfulness as we strive to be in relationships that honor you and that ultimately lead to a greater sense of fulfillment in our lives. We thank you for who you are in Christ. In his name we pray, amen.